All right, so you are looking at some notes called Polynomial Equations and Factoring for A. So we've done quite a bit of work with polynomial equations and factoring, and now we're trying to actually solve quadratic equations at this point. So our goal, a lot of these things we've kind of done, but what we want to do is we want to solve what I like to call medium difficulty quadratic equations. That's our goal. Now, you might remember that an equation is something that has, think for yourself for a moment. An equation is going to have what type of symbol in it? An equation is going to equation an equal sign. So we need to have, like, let's say, for example, x squared plus 3x plus 2 is going to equal something. And I'll just have it equal 0 in this example, all right? We're going to be trying to solve equations instead of just expressions. Expressions don't have an equal sign. They don't have an equal sign. But these are going to have an equal sign. And it's really important that we understand something called the zero product property. I think, and I could be wrong, that I mentioned it in the last video, the zero product property. My apologies. We got to go through some slides here to get to where we... Oh, there's where we're supposed to start. How about that? Okay. So I think it says the zero product property right here, right? So a zero is also called a root, and it's a place where a function crosses the x-axis. So please fill in 0. That's what we're looking for. So a 0 right here, or a root, is a place where a function crosses the x-axis. And we'll look at the graph of that in a minute. And it's also sometimes called a root. In my math classes in college, we call it a root. And this is where the function is actually equal to 0. Please fill in equal to 0. All right? And what I want you to understand is that a function is a line or a curve or something like that that will pass the test. And what do we call that test? It's the vertical line test. Okay? We're trying to find where a function will cross the x-intercept, the x-axis, okay? That's what we need to do. We're going to be dealing with a specific type of function called a parabola, okay? Now, you might think that sounds like some kind of crazy disease, but it's not. Parabola is just an equation of a graph that looks like a U. Okay? It's an equation of any graph that is of the form y equals x squared. And there's a lot more to it, and it looks something like this when you graph it. Okay? Something like that. And we're not going to get crazy with this in this class. We're just going to be talking about parabolas that open upwards and downwards, just kind of prodding at that idea, okay? So remember, the graph of a quadratic equation is called a parabola. And we're looking for a specific type of function called a parabola. That's it. So let's look at an example real quick. So let's go back to that other example that I was talking about. I might change the numbers a little bit. I might make it like x squared plus, perhaps I'll make it 6x plus 8 equals 0. Okay? So I've made this into an equation and not an expression now. We're actually dealing with something with an equal sign. So let's look at this equation and think about how can we simplify, how can we break down, how can we make the left side better. If anyone in our live studio audience would like to chime in, that would be great. How can we break down that left side? I don't think we want to do that because we have an x squared. It's not going to be handled the same way that we would normally. So I was hearing subtract 8, which is probably a common thing to think of. What do you think? That's right. So I heard x plus 4 and x plus 2. And I saw a lot of hands up. I think a lot of people are generally getting that idea, right? So what I want to do right now is I want you to pay very close attention to some colors, okay? I'm actually going to change this to black right now because these colors are going to be really important as we talk about this. All right? So just to set the stage for this, just to set the stage, are you ready? We're going to talk about a couple quick things. What is 0 times 17? It's equal to 0. What is negative 11 times 0? It's equal to 0. What is 2,000 times 0? That's equal to 0. What is 11 times 4 times 9 times 0 times 12 equal to? 0. So there's something special about 0 when you're using multiplication, right? Isn't there something special about 0 when you're using multiplication? I would say yes. So whenever you multiply something by 0, you get, for a result, 0. So here's the deal. Don't miss this part, because this is what I had to, when I was a kid, I had to stay after for extra help on this topic, because this was the only topic. This is the only time I remember having to stay after school for extra help, because I didn't understand why you set them to 0. It didn't make sense to me. And I stayed after school with my teacher in this very classroom that I'm teaching this video right now. And she told me why. And this is what she said. She said, you have two things that multiply together to equal 0. So if that first thing, we'll call it the red thing, is equal to 0, then what happens? If the red thing is equal to 0 and you multiply it by any number, what does it come out to? 0. So if the red thing, I'm just going to literally write that. I'm going to write if the red thing. Well, I'm not going to say the red thing. I'm going to write what the red thing is. Okay, so I'm going to say if x plus 4 is equal to 0, then what do you want to say about that? If x plus 4 is equal to 0, then what? The whole thing? Yes? Well, I don't know, because if x was 0, then you'd have 4 equals, you know what I'm saying? If x plus 4 is equal to 0, the whole thing is equal to 0. I'm going to say the whole thing, the whole, I don't know how else to call it. I'm just going to call it the whole thing equals 0. Okay? That's my first statement. I want to make a statement that that is true. Does anybody disagree with that, or is anybody not solid on that? I mean, there's going to be hundreds of people watching this video, so if you have a question, somebody else probably has that question. Now we look at the blue thing. So, like, let's say the blue thing, for example, is equal to 0. What if we had, you know, whatever this is, right, 95 times 0 equals what? Would it equal 0? Yeah. What if this was 100? 100 times 0. What would that equal? 0. That means it's a multiplication of two things. So if whatever the blue stuff is equal to 0, then it's all 0. Okay? I'm not using very specific math terms because I want you to have a general understanding. So my question is, what number makes the red equal 0? What number 4x makes the red equal 0? That's a big question. That's important. Go ahead. Negative 4 is correct. So here's how we would do this. Here's how we would do this systematically, okay? Because systematically really does, it does make a difference, right? Okay. What we would do is we would take this x plus 4 equals 0, and we would solve it by basic stuff that we learned at the beginning of this year, right? We would solve it, and we get x equals negative 4. You notice what I've solved? The equation down here in the bottom left, right? I solved this equation, and I just got x equals negative 4. Now, here's where the magic happens. This is what blows my mind to this day. You're going to find this to be really cool. Let's take negative 4 and square it. What happens if you take negative 4 and you multiply it by itself? But you have to remember, it's a negative times a negative, right? So it's going to be positive 16. Now you're going to have 6 times negative 4. What's 6 times negative 4? That's negative 24. And then, oops, sorry, thinking ahead. So that's 16 minus 24 plus 8 is equal to 0. Well, is that true? Is it equal to 0? Yeah, it is, because 16 minus 24 is negative 8. Negative 8 plus 8 is equal to 0. So what have I done? What have I done with this? If you look at this equation right here, oh, whoa, wasn't expecting that to happen. Okay, all right, we can recover from this. What can we say about this equation? What's an answer to that equation? Negative 2 and negative 4 are both the answers that you can plug in to get that equation to equal out to 0. Right? Look at the red, okay? Look at the red. I want to hear about that. So look at the red and think about what happened. 16 minus 24 plus 8 is equal to 0, right, altogether. Let's look at the blue for a second. Let's see if we can get this kind of a little more generalized. So you see how I said if x plus 2 equals 0? Does everybody agree with the blue sentence at the bottom? If you don't agree with that, can you tell me why? I mean, I'm saying that two things have to multiply together to equal 0, so one of them equals 0, right? So then I'm saying that x plus 2 equals 0, yeah? So x plus 2 must equal 0, so x must equal negative 2 by solving. Now the question becomes, can we work the same voodoo magic that we did last time? So let's try it. I'm going to get rid of this, I'm going to get rid of this for a second, and I'm going to get rid of these, and I'm going to try to solve this with that x is equal to negative 2. So I'm going to kind of copy that over here, and I'm just going to try to focus on what exactly I'm saying here. So let's see what I'm trying to do here. Clone that piece, bring it up here. Okay. All right, I hear you, I hear you. So let's look at this right here and ask ourselves, if we were to plug into this, negative 2, what would happen? What's negative 2 times negative 2? 4. And then 6 times negative 2 is negative 12, right? And then positive 8, and that hopefully equals 0, and it does equal 0. So we get for our answers are x equals negative 2, and like before we said, x equals negative 4. Those are our two answers for this equation. Anything to add to this? It was okay?
So does the power, like the squared, like that, say what you have?
Fantastic question. The x squared is basically telling you that there's going to be two answers or less. And if there was an x to the third, how many answers would there be? 3 answers or less, never more. And if it was an x to the 8th, how many answers would there be? If it's x to the 8th, 8 answers or less. It could be anything less than that as well, okay? There's a little more to it than that, but that's the basics, okay? So we're going to finish up these notes. Well, let me pause the video there. All right, so picking up with that idea, hopefully we understand how to solve a quadratic equation, but you got to remember there's something very special about this, is that it's always equal to 0, or else we can't use, right? We can't use any of the that zero product property. So that's pretty important. So here are your steps to solving an equation by factoring. You want to do the following. You want to set the right side equal to 0. So in other words, let's say we were kind of jumping ahead a little bit here, and we were looking at this problem over here, down here. I think for you it's just down below, so I'm going to delete. How am I going to do this? Don't worry, guys, I've got a plan. So what we would do here is we would work through this example, okay? And what it says here in blue is to set the right side equal to 0. Well, if you look at this worked example, worked EX, right, it is not set equal to 0. The right side is not equal to 0. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually subtract 18 on the right side and subtract 18 on the left side. And now it's going to equal 0, negative 18 here, x squared plus 3x. So that's done. I can now check off rule number 1. This is the procedure for this. Then you're going to factor the left side of the equation. So breaking down the left side of the equation, hopefully this comes quick for you, but if it doesn't, you've got to go back and watch a video. That's going to be x plus 6x minus 3, okay? Because positive 6 and negative 3 multiply to negative 18. Positive 6 and negative 3 add to positive 3. So that's the red part. And now this is the part that's green, okay? We're remembering that either x plus 6, either x plus 6 is equal to 0, or x minus 3 is equal to 0. We don't know which it is, but we've now set both of the factors equal to 0. That's step 3. And our final step is to solve those equations. Well, the cool thing is that you can't solve that black equation at the top. You can't solve that blue equation even, x squared plus 3x minus 18. But these green equations, right, these green equations down low, these are something that you really can solve. You learn how to solve them. So what you're going to do is you're just going to go ahead and solve those using purple. And we're just going to subtract 6 on both sides. We'll get x equals negative 6. That's an answer that if you plug it in here and here, this whole equation will equal 0. And then this one, we add 3 to both sides. You get x equals 3. The funny thing is that if you take this number and plug it in here and here, you'll get 0. So it's kind of cool that you're able to solve equations using this. So we're getting close to running out of time here. The last thing I want to say is that this doesn't say it, but I want you to do this as the now you try. So this will be the only now you try. Follow the steps over here in rules, and you don't have to worry about these right this moment, okay? So try those in the now you try, and we'll cut the video there. I will talk with you guys soon.